You deserved it. My cousin smirked, her voice cutting through the noise of her own housewarming party. I felt my son's small hand tighten in mine. Moments later, my wealthy grandfather leaned in, his voice a low rasp in my ear. Then she will share your fate. That single sentence was not a comfort. It was a fuse. It lit the match on a chain of events that would drag our entire family through secrets, legal battles, and a final reckoning no one saw coming. My name is Lena Hart. That comment, "You deserved it," was still hanging in the air, sharp as broken glass, and the smirk on my cousin Mara's face told me she'd aimed it to draw blood. We were standing in her new house, a sterile new build in Redwater, Vermont, all gray paint and quartz countertops that looked like they'd never seen a crumb. It was Mara and her husband Colt's housewarming, and the air was thick with the smell of new carpet and catering. My father, Roy Hart, and his sister, my Aunt Helena Quinn, were circulating with plates, their faces split in identical, brittle smiles. Helena, Mara's mother, kept catching my eye and looking away, her hands fluttering like nervous birds. For years, this had been the dynamic. I was 32, an architectural renovator at Harbor and Vale Studio, and a single mother. But in their eyes, I was still the perpetual project, the niece, the daughter, who had lived with them for 3 years after my mother died, a debt they never let me forget I owed. My son, Evan, 6 years old and all knees and elbows, was sitting quietly at my feet, trying to click together 2 small Lego figures he'd smuggled in his pocket. He was the only reason I hadn't already walked out. The clinking of a spoon against a wine glass silenced the room. Mara stood in the center of her new open-plan living room, Colt hovering possessively at her shoulder. She was gleaming, her dress too tight, her hair too bright. She lifted her champagne flute. "I just want to thank everyone for coming," she started, her voice unnaturally high. "It means so much to finally have a place of our own, a real home." Her eyes scanned the crowd, and then, with magnetic precision, they locked onto mine. "It's so important to build your own future, you know? To finally cut ties." A few people shifted, sensing the change in temperature. My father and aunt looked frozen, their smiles painted on. "Because let's be honest," Mara continued, the smirk returning. "A single mother clinging to the family name, living off handouts, it's just a burden, a drain on everyone." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket. I felt the blood rush to my face, a hot, prickling wave. I didn't look at her. I looked at Evan. He had stopped playing. His small head bowed, his shoulders hunched. He was 6, but he understood cruelty. He understood shame. And my primary, biological imperative, stronger than my own anger, was to shield him. Do not react. Do not let them see you crack. Do not give her the satisfaction of seeing him scared. The front door opened, and a different kind of silence fell. A silence of deference, and perhaps a little fear. My grandfather, Silas Hart, stepped inside. He was late, as always. He didn't just enter a room. He occupied it, tall, severe, with a shock of white hair that still looked thick and vital. He surveyed the party, his gaze sweeping over the cheap champagne and the nervous guests. All eyes went to the silver head of his cane. It was an antique, heavy and ornate, and it tapped with a quiet, authoritative thud on Mara's brand-new engineered hardwood. He gave a curt nod, a general greeting to the room. His eyes found mine, held them for a second, and then moved on. They were pale blue, and at this moment, utterly unreadable. Mara, either emboldened by the alcohol or her own profound lack of self-awareness, let out a high-pitched laugh. "Oh, Grandpa, you're just in time. We were just telling Lena the good news." I tensed. There was no good news here. She turned back to me, all pretense of party manners dissolving. Her voice was hard, greedy. "That old dump you're squatting in? Willow House? It's finally going to be put to good use. It's going to be mine soon enough." A cold dread, sharp and immediate, seized my stomach. Willow House wasn't a dump. It was my home. It was Evan's home. It was the 19th century Victorian. I had poured my own money, my own architectural expertise, into restoring for the last 4 years. The new roof that I paid for, the updated electrical, the floors I had stripped and refinished myself. It was the only stable ground my son had ever known. "Mara, what are you talking about?" I kept my voice low, level. She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, please, Lena, stop playing dumb. It's family property, and the family has decided." I looked at my father. Roy Hart, the man who was supposed to protect me, was staring intently at a thermostat on the far wall, his jaw set. "Dad?" He finally turned, but his eyes were flat, dead. The voice he used was not that of a father, but of a hostile administrator. "Lena, this has been decided. We need the property cleared. You need to be out." "Out? Out of where?" "Out of Willow House," he said, his voice clipped. "We have a buyer, and the deal is contingent on immediate possession. You have 48 hours. 48 hours, 2 days, to pack up a life, to uproot my child." The words didn't compute. They were an absurdity. "You can't be serious," I whispered. "Mommy." Evan's voice was a tiny, terrified sound at my side. His small hand didn't just tighten, it gripped mine, a painful, desperate clutch, his fingernails digging into my palm. "Mommy, where are we going?" That was it, the line, all the years of biting my tongue, of placating them, of working to prove my worth, evaporated. My only focus was the small, trembling boy beside me. I turned my back to the room, to Mara's triumphant face and my father's cowardice. I knelt, shielding Evan with my body, putting my hands on his small shoulders. "It's okay, buddy," I whispered, forcing a calm I did not feel. "We're just going to go home now, to our house. Let's get your coat." "But they said—" "I know what they said. It's grown-up talk. And it's silly. I've got you. We're going home." I stood, pulling him close to my side, his face pressed into my hip. I grabbed my bag from the chair. I started for the door, my steps measured, refusing to run. I would not let them see me run. As I passed my grandfather, who was still standing by the entryway like a sentinel, his hand shot out and clamped onto my shoulder. It wasn't a comforting gesture. It was a stop. He leaned in, his cheek brushing my hair, his body blocking me from the view of the room. The scent of old paper and expensive wool filled my nose. "You deserved it." My cousin's voice echoed again from across the room, a final, parting shot. I flinched, but Silas held me firm. He leaned closer, until his mouth was directly at my ear. The room was watching, but they couldn't hear his words. "If she says you deserved it," he whispered, his voice a low rasp, like dry leaves scraping stone, "then she will share your fate." I pulled back just enough to look at him. His eyes weren't angry. They weren't sympathetic. They were cold, calculating. It was the look of a man who had just set a snare and was watching the prey walk toward it. He knew this was coming. He had planned for it. He released my shoulder. I turned, pulled Evan tight, and walked out the front door into the cold Vermont night. The air in that house hadn't just been tense. It was charged. It was the static-filled moment before a lightning strike. I buckled Evan into his car seat, my hands shaking so badly I could barely manage the clip. He was quiet, his eyes wide and dark in the dim light of the car. "Mommy, is Aunt Mara going to take our house?" I got into the driver's seat and turned to face him, forcing a strength into my voice that I didn't feel. "No one is taking our house. Evan, I promise you, no one." But as I drove away, Silas's words repeated in my head, "Then she will share your fate." It wasn't a comfort, it was a threat, and I suddenly realized this wasn't just about a house. The battlefield was already mined, and my family, in their greed, had just stepped right on the trigger. I drove home in a state of controlled shock, the steering wheel cold and rigid beneath my grip. Evan was silent in his car seat, his small face illuminated in flashes of passing streetlights. He wasn't crying, which was worse. He was processing. He was absorbing the tension, the fear, the instability. And that was the one thing I had sworn to protect him from. I got him inside Willow House, our house, and carried him straight upstairs. He was exhausted, his body limp as I changed him into his pajamas. "We're not leaving, are we, Mommy?" he mumbled into his pillow. "No, buddy, we are not leaving," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "This is our home." He accepted this, his breathing evening out almost immediately. I kissed his forehead and pulled the door almost closed, leaving just a sliver of light from the hallway. I walked back down the staircase, my hand trailing on the smooth, worn oak of the banister I had spent a weekend sanding and refinishing. The house was silent, wrapped in the cool Vermont night, smelling of old wood, lemon oil, and the faint, sweet scent of Evans shampoo. This was my sanctuary. This was the structure I had poured my soul into, not just as an architectural renovator, but as a mother. 48 hours. The deadline echoed in the quiet hallway. It was an impossible, absurd demand. And then, Silas's words, "Then she will share your fate." He knew. He had stood there, watching the ambush, and he wasn't surprised. He had expected it, which meant this wasn't a sudden impulse on Mara's part. This was a plan. And like a lens snapping into focus, the vague, unsettling moments of the past few months began to sharpen into a single, terrifying picture. The signs had been there. I had just been too busy working, too focused on parenting, too determined to believe in a baseline of decency that, I now realized, simply did not exist. The whispers. I'd been walking into rooms for the last 6 months to sudden, guilty silence. I'd arrive at my father's house for the obligatory Sunday dinner, and the low murmur of conversation in the kitchen would just stop, cut off mid-word. I remembered walking in 3 weeks ago. My Aunt Helena and my father, Roy, were huddled over the kitchen table. The second my hand touched the doorknob, they sprang apart. "Oh, Lena," Helena had chirped, her hand fluttering to the collar of her blouse. "You startled me. We were just discussing the church bake sale." My father had cleared his throat, a loud, gravelly sound. "Helena's lemon bars, always a big seller." They were such clumsy liars. I had dismissed it then as their usual awkwardness, their discomfort with me, the 32-year-old single mother who didn't need them in the way they seemed to want. Now, I saw it for what it was, conspiracy. And the paper, there was always paper. Just last week, I'd stopped by to pick up Evan. Helena was digging in her cavernous purse. She pulled out a thick, windowed envelope from Pioneer Trust and, seeing me, flinched. She looked at the envelope as if it were toxic, then quickly, furtively, slid it into the pages of the heavy Bible she always carried. "Just some tithe records, dear," she'd murmured, not meeting my eye. Pioneer Trust. The name snagged in my memory, but I couldn't place it. Then there was Mara. She'd been at my father's house constantly, which was a red flag in itself. Mara only visited when she wanted something, usually money. I'd found her at the kitchen counter 2 weeks back. Her back to me. She was hunched over a document, signing her name with a fast, angry flourish. The second she heard my footstep, she slapped a folder over the paper and began aggressively shoving the stack into her designer tote bag. "God. Lena, do you ever knock?" she'd snapped. "It's a kitchen, Mara, not your office." "Just finishing the paperwork for the new house," she'd said, zipping the bag with a vicious tug. "Not that it's any of your business." But I'd seen the top of the paper before she covered it. It wasn't the thick stack of a mortgage closing. It was a single page, heavy cardstock, with blue borders. It looked official. And my father, Roy, that was the betrayal that coiled in my stomach. About a month ago, I had dropped by his office to use his large format printer for some blueprints. The door, usually wide open, was ajar. I heard the distinct click-click of his cell phone camera. I pushed the door open. He was standing over his desk, his phone held above a thick, professionally bound document. He nearly dropped the phone. "Lena, you should call first." He tried to slide the document under a stack of mail, but I was faster. I saw the cover. Certified appraisal report, and in the corner, a high-resolution photo of my front porch, of Willow House. "What is this?" I demanded. "It's nothing, just family records. We have to keep the insurance values updated." His voice was too steady, too rehearsed. "I update the insurance. Dad, I sent you the new policy declarations last month. Why are you paying for a new appraisal?" "It's a family asset, Lena," he'd said, and his eyes were cold, the way they'd been at the party. "It's my job to manage the assets. Don't worry your head about it. It's a family asset, not your home." Now, his words at the party, "We have a buyer," made the appraisal feel sinister. He wasn't updating insurance. He was setting a price. I sat down at my own dining room table, the panic rising, and opened my laptop. The 48-hour clock was ticking. I needed proof. I needed to know what I was fighting. I logged into my email. I searched Pioneer Trust. Nothing. I thought for a moment, then accessed the old Hart family shared account that my father had set up years ago. He insisted all official mail be CC'd there for the records. I rarely checked it. I clicked on the inbox, and there it was, a notification from 4 weeks ago. Missed call notification and secure message from Pioneer Trust. My heart hammered. I clicked the link. This message link has expired. They knew. They had seen the bank trying to contact me, and they had simply ignored it, letting it expire, knowing I would never see it. I scrolled down. An email from 9 days ago, sent at 2:15 in the morning. The sender was an automated address I didn't recognize. Subject: Action required. Transfer of Maintenance Trust 445B. My blood went cold. I opened it. It was mostly unreadable code, but one line of plain text was visible. Your e-signature has been accepted for the transfer of Maintenance Trust Authority. No further action is needed. I'd never signed any such thing. I didn't even know what a maintenance trust was. The clues were stacking up, forming a shape, an ugly, jagged weapon aimed right at me. The new lock on my father's office door, the one he'd installed last week. "Just upgrading security, Lena," he'd said. He wasn't keeping thieves out. He was locking me out. The copy of the roofing invoice, the single biggest investment I'd made, $24,000. I had given him the paid-in-full receipt for his files. I'd seen it on his desk 2 days later, and a smear of white correction fluid, still tacky, was clumsily brushed over the paid stamp. Why would anyone erase proof of payment? Unless they wanted to pretend the bill was still due. Unless they wanted to claim the house was a liability, not an asset. Even Evan, the thought made me sick. He'd come home from an afternoon with Mara 3 days ago, his pockets full of colorful scratch-off lottery tickets. "Look, Mommy, Aunt Mara gave me presents. She said if I win, I have to give her half." I had been furious at the sheer, trashy recklessness of it, giving lottery tickets to a 6-year-old, but now I saw it as a symptom of the same disease. It was a mindset. Nothing was sacred. Everything was a gamble. She was teaching my son about odds while she was betting his home on a long shot. My hands were shaking. I grabbed my phone from my bag. I opened my personal banking app. My balance was fine. My small savings account was untouched. I tapped the Messages and Alerts icon, a tab I almost never looked at. My breath caught. One alert, from 2 days ago. Security alert. An attempt to validate your identity via e-signature for a loan application with Pioneer Trust has failed. It failed. I read the words again and again. A loan application. It all crashed into place. The whispers. Helena hiding the bank envelope. Mara signing papers at the counter. The secret appraisal. The intercepted bank message. The fake maintenance trust email. The altered roofing invoice. They hadn't just planned to sell the house. They had already tried to take out a massive loan against it. They had tried to mortgage Willow House, my home, using my name, my identity. They were trying to steal the equity that I had painstakingly built with my own hands and my own salary. And when the electronic forgery, the e-signature, failed, they panicked. They reverted to blunt force. 48 hours. This wasn't a request. It was an eviction. They were trying to bulldoze me out of the way, to get me physically out of the house so I couldn't receive the certified mail, couldn't answer the door when the bank called, couldn't fight back before the fraudulent deal was done. They saw me, Lena Hart, architect and mother, as nothing but a signature to be forged. They saw my son as collateral damage. The cold dread that had filled me at the party didn't just curdle, it solidified. It turned into something heavy, cold, and sharp. It turned into resolve. My father, my aunt, my cousin, they thought I was a burden. They thought I was weak. They had mistaken my patience for permission. They were about to learn the difference. The failed e-signature alert was the final piece. The dread didn't paralyze me. It clarified everything. My family was actively trying to commit fraud, using my name and my son's home as the vehicle. The 48-hour deadline wasn't a negotiation. It was the second stage of an attack that had already begun. My hands were steady now. I closed the laptop, walked into the kitchen, and put the kettle on. It was just after 10 p.m. I needed a clear head. I wasn't just an architect or a daughter anymore. I was a defendant. There was only one person I trusted to see this not as family drama, but as the civil and criminal matter it was. I picked up my phone and dialed. She answered on the third ring, her voice crisp and awake, even this late. Sloan Mercer. Sloan, it's Lena. Lena, you sound level, which usually means it's a 5-alarm fire, Sloan said. She had been my best friend since our first year of college, and she knew me better than my own family. She was an independent civil and commercial litigator, the sharpest mind I knew. What's wrong? I need a lawyer, I said, the words tasting like metal. Okay, who are we suing? I think my father and my aunt and my cousin. There was a half-second of silence, not shock, but processing. Right, Sloan said. Give me the facts. Leave out the how it made you feel. Just the timeline. What happened tonight? I told her. Mara's party, the toast about the burden of a single mother, the public claim on Willow House, and then the ultimatum from my father. 48 hours to get out. 48 hours, Sloan repeated, her voice turning hard. That's not a legal notice. That's an intimidation tactic. It's constructive eviction, and it's illegal as hell. But it's also a symptom. What's the disease? Lena? Why now? Because they failed to steal it quietly, I said. I then walked her through the breadcrumbs, the whispers. Helena hiding the Pioneer Trust envelope, Mara's hurried signing, the secret appraisal, the intercepted bank message, the fake 2 a.m. email about a maintenance trust, and finally, the alert from my own bank, a failed e-signature validation for a loan application. Sloan let out a low whistle. A loan application, not a sale, a loan. That's ambitious and stupid. We're not just in eviction territory anymore. Lena, this is conspiracy to commit wire fraud, identity theft. What do I do? Sloan, they gave me 2 days. Do I pack? Do I confront them? You do neither, she commanded, her voice pulling me into focus. You're not a cornered tenant. You're a victim of a crime. We're going to treat this like a legal case, not a family squabble, and we are going to do it by your rules. My rules? Yes, your rules. Rule number 1. And I'm guessing this is the only one that matters. Evan. A knot of gratitude so tight it almost hurt formed in my throat. She knew. He can't be scared. Sloan, he can't see this. I will not have him grow up watching his mother in a screaming match or seeing a sheriff at the door. Whatever we do, it has to be quiet. It has to be invisible to him. He has to feel safe. Then quiet is the strategy, Sloan said. We don't react to their 48-hour clock. We ignore it. It has no legal standing. We start our own clock. We are now in evidence-gathering mode. And you are the lead investigator. You're still on the inside, and they don't know that you know. That is our single greatest advantage. What do you need me to do? First, passive collection. This is critical. Lena, do not touch their original files. Do not log into their computers. Do not confront them. You will only photograph and log. Create a new, secure cloud account. Tonight, I want you to start a document, a timeline. Every incident you just told me, with dates and times if you can remember them. Be meticulous. I was already grabbing a legal pad. Okay, done. Second, your own records. You mentioned you renovated Willow House? Extensively, I said, glancing at the hand-stenciled walls of my own kitchen. The roof, the electrical, the new boiler, the kitchen appliances, the flooring in the attic. It cost a fortune, but it was my investment. Good. It's not just your investment. It's your defense. I want you to create a spreadsheet. Every single receipt, every invoice, every check you wrote, every credit card statement showing a purchase from a hardware store or a payment to a contractor related to this house. Scan them all. We are going to build an unimpeachable record of your financial stake. We'll show that you haven't just been squatting, as Mara so charmingly put it. You've been actively improving the asset they're trying to leverage. I thought of the box of files in my office. I have all of it, every receipt. I knew you would, Sloane said, a rare warmth in her voice. Third, security. Tomorrow morning. First thing, buy a doorbell camera, a high-quality one with cloud storage. Install it. They're going to try to serve you with bogus papers, or send someone to intimidate you, or try to enter the property when you're out. We need a visual record of every person who approaches that front door. From now on, you don't answer the door to any process server. You don't sign for any certified mail. You let the camera record them, and you text me a picture. Okay, doorbell camera. Fourth, digital, Sloane continued. Check your home Wi-Fi logs tonight. Look for any unrecognized devices. Your father, your aunt, have they been in your house recently? Could they have connected a device? I thought back. Dad was here last week. He said he needed to check the circuit breaker for the appraisal. He's a fool, Sloane stated flatly. Check the logs. Screenshot any device that isn't yours or Evan's, and download your bank statements. All of them. For the last 2 years. We need a baseline of your normal financial activity to contrast with the fraudulent loan application. I can do all of that. My panic was receding, replaced by a cold, methodical focus. This was like prepping an architectural site review. You document the existing conditions before you start demolition. Good, Sloane said. While you're doing that, I'll be drafting. I'm preparing a reservation of rights and cease and desist letter. It's a beautiful, terrifying document. It will state that you are the lawful occupant of the property, that you are aware of their fraudulent attempts to secure a loan against it, and that any attempt to remove you from the premises will be met with the full force of the law, including claims for damages, fraud, and emotional distress. We won't send it yet. This is our bomb. We don't detonate it until we've chosen the time and place. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated relief. I wasn't just a daughter being bullied. I was a client with representation. And Lena? The most important part. Evan, I said. Evan, she confirmed. You are his mother. You are his whole world. This family of yours. They're acting like cornered animals. They're going to get nastier. They're going to aim for your weak spot. And he's it. You must, under all circumstances, maintain a wall of absolute normalcy for him. No raised voices, no panicked phone calls in his presence. You stick to his routine. You take him to school. You read him his stories. You are a calm, happy, invincible fortress. His entire sense of security depends on it. You are not allowed to be anything else. You understand? I understand, I said, my voice thick. I promise. No hatred in front of him. He won't see it. This is how we win. We don't get drawn into their chaotic, screaming match world. We drag them, kicking and screaming, into ours, a world of evidence, procedure, and consequences. We are going to build a case so tight and so documented that by the time we present it, their only option will be surrender. So we have a plan, I said. We have a two-tiered plan, Sloane corrected me. Tier 1 is the legal front, public, documented, and by the book. That's what I'm running. Tier 2, that's the psychological front, the quiet war. That one's yours. What do you mean? Your grandfather, she said. Silas, you said he knew. You said he whispered. She will share your fate. That wasn't a platitude. Lena, that was a move. He's playing a different game. Your father and your aunt are afraid of him, and Mara wants his money. He's the variable they can't control. You need to know what he knows. She was right. Silas's words weren't just a comfort. They were an invitation, a signal that he was an ally, but one who wouldn't act until he was approached. I'll call him tomorrow, I said. I'll set up a meeting, just me and him. Good. Don't tell him about me. Not yet. Don't mention fraud or loan applications. Just tell him what happened. Tell him about the 48-hour threat. Ask him what his words meant. Listen to what he tells you. He holds the map to the family's landmines. We need that map. We hung up. The kitchen was silent again. But it was no longer the empty, terrifying silence of before. It was the silence of a workshop, of a mind getting ready to build. I looked at the clock. 11:30 p.m. The first day of their 48-hour countdown was almost over. They were probably sleeping, or drinking, celebrating their cleverness. They thought I was packing. They thought I was crying. I, on the other hand, was just getting started. I made a fresh cup of tea, sat down at my laptop, and began to build my fortress. One receipt at a time. I would not let Evan down. He would go to school in the morning as if nothing had happened. He would come home to his house, to his room, to his mother, who was, as far as he was concerned, completely and totally invincible. I called Silas the next morning. My voice was clipped, professional, scraped clean of the fear and rage that had churned in me all night. While Evan ate his cereal, I stood at the window, watching the calm, gray Vermont morning, and made the call. Grandfather, I need to talk to you about what happened at Mara's. His reply was instant, devoid of surprise. My study, 11 a.m. I got Evan off to school. I kissed his cheek at the drop-off line, his backpack bouncing as he ran to join his friends. His world was bright, simple, and safe. I intended to keep it that way. The contrast between his innocent morning and the purpose of my drive was a physical ache. Silas's house was on the other side of Redwater, a severe stone manor that loomed over the lake. It was old money, dark wood, and the scent of floor polish and leather-bound books. Where I had worked to fill Willow House with light and warmth, his home was a fortress, a vault. His housekeeper, a woman who had been with him for 30 years, showed me to the study. The room was lined with books that looked as if they had never been read, only possessed. Silas was not behind his massive mahogany desk. He was standing by a tall, narrow cabinet of dark cherry wood, his back to me. You were right to come to me, he said, his voice quiet. He didn't turn around. He placed one hand on the smooth wood of the cabinet. It wasn't a cabinet. He manipulated a small, nearly invisible dial hidden in the carved molding. A heavy, satisfying thunk echoed in the quiet room. He pulled the door open, revealing a safe lined with dark green velvet. It wasn't filled with cash or jewels. It was filled with documents, ledgers, and deeds. He reached inside and pulled out a single, thick vellum envelope. It was tied with a faded blue ribbon. He placed it on the polished desk, exactly between us. 8 years ago, he said, finally turning to look at me. His eyes were clear and sharp. After your grandmother died, I restructured things. Your father and your aunt were disappointed. They wanted a liquidation. I preferred a legacy. My hands were shaking, just slightly. As I reached for the envelope, I pulled the ribbon. It wasn't a simple will. It was the founding charter for the Hart Family Trust. I was an architect. I was used to reading dense contracts. But this was different. This was my life. I scanned the formal, legal language, the pages thick and cool to the touch. And then I found it. Section 4, the Willow House property. My breath caught. Willow House was not a disposable asset. Silas had designated it a legacy anchor. It was placed irrevocably into the trust, shielded from sale, shielded from the whims of the market. And then, Section 4, Subsection B. The sole lifetime beneficiary of the Willow House residence and its surrounding grounds is designated as my granddaughter, Lena Hart. I looked up, stunned. Sole beneficiary? Read the rest, he said, his voice flat. Contingent, I read, upon her fulfillment of the duties of preservation and upkeep, ensuring the property is maintained, protected, and improved, thus honoring the family's heritage. All the work, the new roof, the $24,000 I'd spent, the upgraded electrical system, the weekends I'd lost sanding those floors, it wasn't just me fixing up my home, it was my qualification, it was my end of the bargain. And then I saw the next clause, the one that made the blood drain from my face. No lien, mortgage, or other encumbrance may be placed upon the Willow House property during the lifetime of the beneficiary. This protective clause may only be voided by the direct, wet signature of Lena Hart, witnessed and notarized by the acting trust executor. The failed e-signature, the 2:15 a.m. email about a maintenance trust. They knew, or at least, they knew it was protected. They knew they couldn't just take it. They had to steal it. They were trying to get my signature. And when they couldn't, they tried to forge it. They had tried to break the one ironclad rule of the trust. You knew, I whispered, looking up at him. The document felt heavy as a stone in my hands. At the party, you knew what they were planning. When you said she would share my fate, you weren't guessing. Silas nodded, a slow, deliberate movement. He picked up his silver-headed cane, which had been resting against the desk. He tapped it once on the floor. The sound was a sharp, definitive thwack on the antique rug. I knew what they are, he corrected me. Your father sees assets, not homes. Your aunt sees status, not family. And Mara, she is the sum of their greed. Greed is a corrosive acid. Lena, you cannot stop it from the outside. You must let it eat its own container. He reached into his vest pocket, the one that held his antique pocket watch. He pulled out a second, smaller envelope. This one was sealed with a thick, ominous disc of dark red wax. This, he said, holding it between two fingers, is the addendum to the trust. It was filed with my lawyers the same day. It remains unannounced. He held it up to the light. It contains a single trigger clause, a condition that, if met, fundamentally alters the disbursement of the entire Hart estate, everything, the stocks, the other properties, the cash. What's the trigger? I asked, though I already knew the answer. A finding of fraud. Any attempt, proven by a preponderance of evidence, by any listed beneficiary to secure assets from the trust, or from another beneficiary, through illegal, coercive, or fraudulent means. This was the minefield. He hadn't just watched them walk toward it. He had built it, calibrated it, and buried it right in their path. My eyes went to the cane, the heavy, ornate silver wolf's head at the top. He saw me looking. A thin, cold smile touched his lips. With a deft movement, he twisted the wolf's head. It came free from the ebony stick with a quiet, oiled snick. It wasn't just a handle. It was a vault. Embedded deep within the heavy, solid silver casting was a small, intricately cut brass key. The lock on the addendum box at my lawyer's office is unique, he said, refitting the head. They see an old man's prop. I see a failsafe. They have been waiting for me to die, or to become senile. They never once thought to simply look at what was already done. The weight of it all hit me. The betrayal, the calculated cruelty of my own father, giving me 48 hours to vacate a house that was already mine, a house he was actively trying to steal. And a memory, sharp and sudden, blindsided me. It was 2 years ago, a massive nor'easter. the wind howling like a living thing, driving sheets of rain against the windows of Willow House. Evan was 4, and he was terrified. The wind had ripped a 3-foot section of the old roofing shingles clean off, and water was pouring into the attic, streaming down the walls. I had spent all night up there, in the dark, with a flashlight and every bucket I owned. I was moving Evan's stored baby clothes, the boxes of photographs, anything to keep them dry. I remember whispering to the house itself, promising it that I would fix it. I promised Evan, who was crying in his bed, that the house was strong, that it would keep us safe. The next day, I had called the roofers and liquidated half of my savings to pay for it, $24,000. I hadn't just been fixing a leak, I had been fulfilling the trust. I had been holding up my end of the bargain, fighting a storm, while my family plotted to create one. The memory solidified my resolve from cold dread into steel. "They can't have it," I said, my voice low and fierce. "I will not let them." "Good." Silas put his thin, strong hand on my shoulder. It was heavy, a transference of duty, of power. "Do not be afraid to do what is right. Lena, right is not always gentle, right is not always kind. Often, it is a hammer." "I've already spoken to a lawyer," I confessed. "My friend, Sloane Mercer. She's the one who identified the fraud. She's building the legal case." "Excellent. A two-front war." "I have the proof," I continued, pulling out my phone. I showed him the screenshot of the bank alert, the failed e-signature. I showed him the 2:15 a.m. email about the fake trust. His eyes narrowed. "They are sloppy, arrogant." "I also have this," I said. I showed him a photograph I had taken with my phone. It was the Pioneer Trust envelope, the one I'd seen Helena frantically shove into her Bible. After she'd left my father's house, I'd forgotten my keys and gone back in. I'd found the Bible, and inside, the envelope. It was addressed to me, at my father's address. It was marked, "Second Notice, Action Required." I hadn't opened it. I had photographed it, handling it only by the very corners, and then, using gloves from the kitchen, I'd slipped it into a Ziploc bag. "Helena's fingerprints are all over this. Mine are not." Silas looked at the photo for a long time. "They believe their own narrative," he said. "That you are a weak, disorganized single mother. That I am a senile old man with a checkbook." He tapped the desk. "This is our advantage. We will let them believe it, right up until the end. Your lawyer, Ms. Mercer, will handle the law. That is the steel frame. We will handle the theater." "The theater?" "Mara is hosting another gathering, is she not?" His lip curled. "Your Aunt Helena cannot keep a secret she thinks will impress someone. A gift announcement for her new house. I hear. She wants to show off. She wants to cement the new status she believes Willow House has secured for her. They are going to make a public show of their success." "So we confront them there, in public, with Sloane?" "No," Silas smiled, and it was a chilling sight. "We allow them to confront us. They will be expecting a fight with you. The hysterical woman, they will not be expecting a reckoning with me. Let them think they have me fooled. Let them think they are managing me. Let them walk onto the stage they've built for themselves." I understood. This wasn't just about defense. It was a counteroffensive. Sloane was building the legal weapon. Silas was building the trap. "They want to make a public announcement," I said, the plan forming, cold and clear. "Then we'll be there to watch." "We will be there," Silas agreed, "to provide the final act." He pushed the vellum envelope containing the trust charter across the desk. He did not retie the ribbon. "Keep this," he said. "It belongs to the lady of the house." The 48-hour deadline had passed. They had given me 2 days to be gone, and on the 3rd day, they threw a party. It was not just a party, it was a coronation. Mara and Colt had sent out embossed invitations for a gift announcement and capital celebration at their new showpiece apartment, the Harborview Lofts. This was not about housewarming. It was about humiliation. It was a public execution of my standing in the family, designed to showcase that they had won, that the dead wood had been cleared, and that the asset, my home, was now theirs to leverage. I arrived with two people, my son and my grandfather. Silas, however, waited in the car. "Set the stage, Lena," he'd said, his hand resting on the silver wolf's head. "I will make my entrance when the curtain rises." My first priority was the only one that mattered. Evan. I had called the building management earlier, confirming they had a supervised children's lounge. I walked Evan there first, bypassing the party completely. The room was bright, clean, and run by a vetted caregiver. I'd brought his favorite, massive tub of Legos. "Mommy, are you going to the party?" he asked, his eyes already scanning for the perfect flat piece to start a foundation. "For a little while, buddy," I said, kissing his hair. "It's a boring grown-up thing. You build a spaceship. I'll be back before you even miss me." "Okay," he said, already lost in his world. I closed the door, and the sound of his happy, focused chatter was sealed away. The wall was up. He was safe. I turned and walked toward the penthouse lounge, my stomach a cold knot of resolve. The room was packed. It was all glass and white leather, overlooking the dark, cold water of the lake. The air smelled of expensive perfume and catered appetizers. Mara was in a dress so bright red it hurt the eyes, a champagne flute permanently attached to her hand. My father, Roy, and my aunt, Helena, stood on either side of her and Colt, a smug, triumphant royal court. When my father saw me, his smile faltered. He looked shocked, then angry. He clearly expected me to be halfway to a motel. My car loaded with boxes. He did not expect me to be here, in a simple black dress, my head held high. "Lena," he said, his voice a low warning, "I don't think this is the place for you tonight." "You invited me, Dad," I said coolly. Mara let out a high-pitched laugh. "Oh, let her stay. It's good for her to see what real success looks like." Just then, the elevator doors opened, and Silas entered. The tap-tap-tap of his ebony cane on the marble floor cut through the chatter. A hush fell. My father and aunt looked like they'd been struck by lightning. Silas ignored them all, took a glass of water from a passing tray, and found a tall chair in the corner, settling in to watch the stage he knew so well. My father cleared his throat, his composure visibly cracking. He was supposed to be in charge. Silas's presence ruined the script, but the guests were waiting. Roy tapped his glass. "Friends, family," he began, his voice overly hearty. He refused to look in Silas's direction. "It's days like this that remind us what's truly important. Unity. Family unity is our greatest strength." I felt the acid rise in my throat. "Sometimes," he continued, his eyes flicking to me, "a family has to make difficult decisions, to streamline, to ensure the health of the whole, and I am just so proud of Mara and Colt for having the vision to see the potential, to help us leverage our shared history into a stronger future." The scattered, polite applause was Mara's cue. She raised her glass. "Thank you, Daddy, and thank you all for coming. We are just so thrilled to announce that our new investment ventures are, well, choasted. We've secured the capital for our next phase, thanks to the restructuring of a few, very old, family assets." She looked directly at me, her smile a cruel slash. "It's amazing what you can accomplish when you finally clear out the drains." This was it. "Congratulations, Mara," I said, stepping forward. The room turned to look at me. "I actually brought you a gift, something to mark the occasion." I held out a slim silver envelope. It was heavy, made of linen paper. It looked expensive. It looked important. She took it, her eyes narrowing in suspicion. She was expecting tears or a scene, not this. "Go on," I said. "Open it. It's relevant to your announcement." She ripped it open, her arrogance making her careless. She pulled out the single, folded sheet of heavy bond paper. She read the first line. The bright, artificial color in her cheeks vanished. She looked up at me, her face pale with a confusion that was rapidly turning to rage. "What? What is this?" she hissed, her voice low so the guests couldn't hear. Is this a joke? I don't joke about fraud, I said, just as quietly. What is this? She demanded again, louder this time. That, a new voice said, crisp and clear, is a cease and desist letter and a formal notice of legal hold. Sloane Mercer stepped out from the alcove near the doorway. She was in a charcoal suit, carrying a leather satchel. She radiated an authority that silenced the room more effectively than Silas's cane. Beside her stood a young woman in a similar suit, holding a tablet and a phone. Sloane Mercer, she introduced herself to the room. I am counsel for Ms. Lena Hart. My father's face went white. Counsel? He sputtered. Counsel, Sloane affirmed. Since Mrs. Quinn seems to be having trouble, I'll summarize the document she's holding. Sloane's voice was conversational, but it carried to every corner of the glass-walled room. The letter identifies my client, Lena Hart, as the sole, non-revocable lifetime beneficiary of the Willow House property, as stipulated in the Hart Family Trust, a document you are all aware of. My father looked like he was going to be sick. It further details a conspiracy, Sloane continued, to commit wire fraud by attempting to secure a mortgage against this protected trust asset. It names Pioneer Trust as the institution, and it notes the use of a forged electronic signature in my client's name. It demands that you preserve all digital and physical records pertaining to this illegal act. Oh, and it informs you that the 48-hour eviction notice you served my client constitutes illegal harassment. The silence in the room was absolute. It was suffocating. Every guest was frozen, staring. Mara's shock finally broke. It didn't just crack. It shattered. Her face contorted, her eyes wide with a pure, venomous hatred. She forgot the guests. She forgot the party. She forgot everything but the fact that I had dared to fight back. You? You bitch! She shrieked, the word tearing through the stunned quiet. You think this stops anything? You think you're smart? You are nothing. You are a broke, pathetic single mother living on our charity. You deserve to be kicked out. You deserved everything you got. Then she will share your fate. Silas's words echoed in my head. Before the guests could even process Mara's primal scream, Silas stood. He didn't rush. He simply rose to his full height, a figure of absolute judgment. Thwack! His cane hit the marble floor. The sound was like a gunshot. Ms. Mercer, Silas said, his voice calm and lethal. I believe that outburst satisfies the final condition. All eyes snapped to him. He was not looking at Mara. He was looking at his cane. With a slow, deliberate movement that held the entire room captive, he grasped the silver wolf's head. He twisted it. A collective, audible gasp. He upended the handle. A small, ornate, dark brass key fell into his open palm. He didn't look at it. He walked to the central glass table, the one piled with champagne glasses and half-eaten appetizers. He placed the key on the glass. It landed not with a tinkle, but with a heavy, final click. That, Silas announced to the room, is the key to the sealed addendum of the Hart Family Trust, an addendum which, until this exact moment, was in force but unactivated. Helena, my aunt, finally found her voice. It was a terrified whisper. Addendum? Roy, what is he talking about? Sloane stepped forward again, into the center of the circle of stunned faces. My paralegal, she said, gesturing to the young woman, who, I now saw, was holding her phone up, its camera light glowing red, is recording this event, which has now become a legal proceeding, Mrs. Quinn's public admission of malice, witnessed by all of you, fulfills the morality clause required to unseal. Unseal what? Roy choked out. The addendum, Sloane said, which Mr. Silas Hart, the trust's executor, has authorized me to summarize. It stipulates that a finding of fraud, coercion, or public defamation intended to dispossess another beneficiary, specifically Lena Hart, triggers an immediate, permanent, and total diversion of assets. Diversion? Mara whispered, the word hollow. A diversion, Sloane clarified, her voice devoid of emotion. Of all specified stocks, properties, and liquid funds previously earmarked for the offending parties, that would be the entire Quinn family line. And of course, any and all named co-conspirators. My father's legs buckled. He gripped the back of a chair to hold himself up. Helena let out a small, strangled sound. Mara finally understood. She wasn't just losing the house she'd tried to steal. She was losing everything. The inheritance she had been counting on her entire life, her future, her past. It was gone. But her husband, Colt, was not thinking about the future. He was thinking about the present. He was thinking about the word fraud. He was thinking about jail. I saw the shift. It was a rapid sequence, a montage of pure panic. Mara, frozen, staring at the key, trapped by the loss of her future. Colt, electrified by the fear of immediate consequences. He began to back away, turning his body, pulling his phone from his pocket, his thumb blurring across the screen. He thought no one was watching him. He was wrong. I glanced at Sloane. She wasn't watching Colt. She was watching her paralegal's tablet. "Mr. Quinn?" Sloane said, her voice conversational again. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Colt froze, his head snapping up, his face a mask of pure terror. "Do what?" "I'm not doing anything." "Texting your broker," Sloane said. "The one you're currently instructing to sell it all now and dump the North Lantern shares before this gets out. It's too late for that." Colt looked like he'd been physically struck. How did you... Sloane permitted herself a small, cold smile. "We anticipated you might try to destroy evidence or liquidate assets related to the fraudulent loan. The building's guest Wi-Fi, the one you're logged into, is compromised. We set up a simple rogue access point with a packet sniffer. We've been capturing your unencrypted data for the last 15 minutes. My paralegal already has the screenshot." She turned the tablet around. There, on the screen, was a perfect image of Colt's panicked text message. Time-stamped. Proof of his guilt. Proof he knew the North Lantern Group was tied to the fraud. The room was silent, watching this parallel execution. Colt looked at his phone, then at his wife, then at Sloane. He had just handed us the last piece of evidence we needed. Mara finally moved. She looked from the tablet to her husband's ashen face, to the brass key on the table, and then, finally, to me. Her eyes were no longer angry. They were hollow. The trap, the one Silas had set 8 years ago, had snapped shut, and it had been Mara's own greed, her own public cruelty, that had shoved her entire family right into it. The party at the Harborview Lofts shattered the conspiracy, but it didn't end the war. It was an explosion that left rubble, and in the days that followed, Sloane and I began to sift through it. Her office, usually a space of calm, minimalist order, was dominated by a massive whiteboard. It was our map, a flowchart of my family's greed. In the center, Sloane had drawn 4 boxes: Roy, Helena, Mara, Colt. Arrows shot out from all of them, all pointing to a single, larger box at the bottom, Willow House. But there was another box, off to the side, that Sloane had drawn in a menacing red marker. North Lantern Group, and from Colt's name, a frantic, looping arrow pointed right at it. "This is the engine," Sloane said, tapping the red box. "The why. It wasn't just about the house, Lena. It was never just about the house. The house was the buy-in. After the public implosion at the party, and Colt's legally recorded panicked text message, a swift court order had granted us access to the digital records he had abandoned at the loft in his flight. He and Mara had been staying there, and in their haste to flee the scene, he'd left behind an old laptop. The emails on it told the real story. North Lantern Group, Sloane explained, was a so-called regional investment fund. We've been digging. It was a classic Ponzi scheme, disguised as a property development fund, and Mara was in deep... She pointed to a printout she'd taped to the board. It was a digital brochure for North Lantern. It promised guaranteed returns, not 5%, not 10, 30%, compounding every 3 months. It was a fantasy, I whispered, staring at the absurd promise. It's the oldest fantasy in the book, Sloane said. And Mara bit hard. She put in an initial deposit, we think from my father's gifts, but it wasn't enough. The leaked client agreements, which we got from another investor who's also suing, show that to get into the founder's circle, to really get those 30% returns, you had to prove significant assets. Specifically, you had to pledge unencumbered real estate as collateral to increase your investment ceiling. Suddenly, my father's secret appraisal of Willow House made perfect, sickening sense. He wasn't trying to sell it, I said, connecting the dots. He was trying to use it as the asset base. He was going to pledge my home as collateral so Mara could gamble it on a Ponzi scheme. Exactly, Sloane said, drawing a thick black line from Roy to North Lantern. He saw Willow House as a lazy, underperforming asset. You were living in it, but it wasn't making him money. But Silas's trust, that was the roadblock. She tapped the trust document I had given her, the one Silas had let me keep. Section 4, subsection B, the ironclad, no encumbrance clause, the lock. They couldn't pledge the house as collateral because the trust legally forbade it, unless, she added, they had your direct, wet signature, a signature they knew you would never, ever give. So they planned to get it without my knowledge. This, Sloane said, holding up a clear plastic evidence bag, is where the conspiracy gets organized. Inside the bag was a single sheet of paper. It was a notary's schedule from a local UPS store, dated for an afternoon 3 weeks ago. We subpoenaed the records, Sloane said. At 2 p.m. on that Tuesday, an appointment was scheduled by Helena Quinn for a family trust signing. The person to be notarized? Lena Hart. I stared at the date. I didn't have to check my calendar. That was the day of Evan's school play, I said, my voice hollow. The second-grade pageant. Helena knew I'd be there. She bought the tickets for all of us. She was the logistics, Sloane said, writing logistics, mail, scheduling under Helena's name. She was running the ground game. She scheduled the notary for a time she knew you'd be in an auditorium with your phone off. She was the one intercepting the mail from Pioneer Trust. Sloane held up a second bag. Inside was the very envelope I had photographed and slipped into a Ziploc bag from Helena's Bible. We ran a handwriting analysis on the address. It was addressed to you, at your father's house, but the CEO, Roy Hart, was added in a different hand, Helena's. She was filtering your mail, hiding the default notices, the second requests, everything. And then, the digital evidence. When the notary plan failed, because you never showed, they got desperate, Sloane said. They moved to forgery. She pointed to a printed log. The metadata from the failed e-signature attempt, the one your bank flagged, it's beautiful. It contains the exact time of the attempt, 2:14 a.m., 9 days ago. It contains the PDF file name they tried to use, Willow Hart Loan Final PDF. And best of all, it contains the IP address of the machine that submitted it. She drew a circle around the string of numbers. This IP address doesn't belong to a bank. It's not a public terminal. It's the unique identifier for the high-speed internet service at Mara and Colt's new house. They had tried to forge my name, to steal my home, from their own kitchen, in the middle of the night. But Colt's emails are the final nail, Sloane said, her voice grim. She read from a printout, recovered from the laptop. It was from Colt to my father, Roy. Roy, it read, the e-sig failed. The bank system is too smart. We have to pivot. We need to get her out of the house now, if she's not physically present. We can claim she abandoned the property, and you, as the primary trust manager, can file for an emergency transfer of maintenance. We'll push her out first, then handle the paperwork later. Start the clock on her. Tell her she has 2 days. Push her out first, then handle the paperwork. My 48-hour eviction notice, it wasn't just cruelty, it was the failed, clumsy, brutal Plan B. While all this was happening, Silas had made his own, silent move. He'd gone to the branch manager of Pioneer Trust, a man he'd known for 30 years, not as a customer, but as the executor of the Hart Family Trust. He had presented the trust documents. He had informed the bank, in no uncertain terms, that the asset they were attempting to place a lien on was legally protected and that any further action would be considered aiding and abetting fraud. He didn't just warn them, he'd had Sloan draft a notice. He put a temporary legal freeze on all transactions, registrations, or inquiries related to Willow House, citing a hostile internal dispute. He had cut off their access to the money before they even knew the tap was dry. I stood there, looking at the whiteboard, at this intricate, ugly web of deceit. My father's financial scheming, my aunt's petty, logistical betrayals, my cousin's raw, screaming greed. My hands were shaking. But it wasn't from fear. It was from the absolute, chilling realization of what I was to them. I wasn't Lena. I wasn't a daughter, or a niece, or a mother. I was a thing. I was a broken signature on a PDF. I was an obstacle in a house that needed to be cleared out. I was an asset to be leveraged. They had looked at me and at my son, and they had seen nothing but a barrier to a 30% return. And that, I decided, was the last time they would ever see me as anything less than the woman who would hold them accountable. I won't let Evan grow up in this, I said, my voice quiet, but harder than I'd ever heard it. I will not let him think this is what family is. This isn't just about the house anymore. Sloan, it's about dismantling this system. So what's the plan? Sloan asked, uncapping a fresh black marker. We don't just defend, I said. We counterattack. A three-pronged plan. Sloan smiled. I love a good three-pronged plan. Talk to me. 1. Legal. We file everything. The fraud, the conspiracy, the identity theft. We go to the police. We make it official. Done, Sloan said. The file is ready. I just need your final sign-off. 2. Media, North Lantern Group. It's a Ponzi scheme. They're not the only victims, and Mara and Colt aren't the only greedy ones in Redwater. I want you to leak the brochure, the guaranteed returns, to that financial columnist at the Redwater Journal, anonymously. Let the town start asking its own questions. Let our family's name get caught in the backdraft. Sloan raised an eyebrow. Scorched earth, I like it. And 3? This was the part Silas and I had discussed, the theater. 3, I said, is the final act. We're not going to let this play out in a sterile courtroom over 2 years. We're going to end it. My great-grandmother's memorial is in 2 weeks. It's the one family event that no one, not even Roy or Helena, can skip without looking like monsters. It's always held at the Redwater Community Hall. It's a public space. A public space, Sloan repeated, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. A public space, a captive audience, and a pretense of family unity. You want a reckoning. Lena, a public one. They tried to humiliate me in public, I said, thinking of Mara's party. They tried to dispossess me in public. It's only fitting we hold them accountable in public. We'll invite the town elders. We'll invite the bank manager. We'll turn that memorial dinner into a final hearing. Sloan nodded, drawing a new box on the whiteboard. She labeled it, the memorial. It's not just a dinner, she said. It's a tribunal. The Redwater Community Hall smelled of stale coffee, industrial floor wax, and the faint, dusty scent of decades of town meetings. It was a room built for utility, not comfort, with pale yellow walls, fluorescent lighting, and rows of metal-legged folding chairs. This was where Redwater debated property taxes and held high school bake sales. Tonight, it was a memorial. And a tribunal. My promise to Evan was my shield. He was at home with Mrs. Allen, our most trusted babysitter. When I left, he was happily sorting blue and gray bricks for a massive, multi-decked ship, a world of his own creation. He was safe. He was happy. He was nowhere near this. That knowledge settled the last of my nerves, leaving only a cold, sharp clarity. My family was already there, huddled near the front, a small, dark island of resentment. Roy, Helena, Mara, and Colt, they looked pale and furious. Cornered, they had been forced to attend. To skip a public memorial for the family matriarch would have been a fatal social error in a town like Redwater. They had to come, and they knew, by the presence of the other guests, that this was not a memorial. Sloane had been meticulous. She had invited, as friends of Silas Hart, Mr. Henderson, the branch manager of Pioneer Trust. She had invited Miss Davis, the independent notary. She had also invited two of the town's most prominent elders and, as I'd requested, the financial columnist from the Redwater Journal, who was sitting in the back row with a notepad. Silas, Sloane, and I sat in the front row, opposite my family. The event began with the required pretense. The hall secretary, a no-nonsense woman named Mrs. Gable, read a short, prepared statement about my great-grandmother. Then, as was custom, she invited my father, Roy, to speak. He stood, his hands gripping the flimsy lectern. He attempted a smile, but it was a grimace. "Thank you for coming. My mother, my grandmother. She believed in family, in unity." His eyes, hard and angry, found mine. She believed that a family worked together for the common good, that no one part was more important than the whole. In recent weeks, there have been divisive actions taken by some, driven by misunderstanding, that threaten the very unity she held so dear. It is my deepest regret that a simple family business matter, an attempt to act in everyone's best interest, has been so maliciously misconstrued. He was painting me as the villain, the wrecking ball. "He's good," Sloane murmured, her voice too low for anyone else to hear. "He's trying to frame you as the hysteric who couldn't understand business." Mara, emboldened by her father's words, leaned over and said to her mother, just loud enough for the rows around them to hear, "She just misunderstood. We were helping her. She's twisting everything." Roy sat down to a smattering of confused, polite applause. Sloane stood up. She did not go to the lectern. She stood from her seat, her voice calm, clear, and projecting to the back wall. "Thank you, Mr. Hart, for those words on the common good and the importance of avoiding misunderstanding." Sloane's tone was all professional courtesy. My client, Lena Hart, agrees, which is why, in the spirit of community clarity, we'd like to clear up this misunderstanding right now. Roy sprang to his feet. "This is a memorial. This is highly inappropriate." "It is a community gathering, in a public hall, which you yourself just used to make public accusations against my client," Sloane countered, her voice sharpening. "Please, sit down, Mrs. Gable," she said, turning to the hall secretary. "I believe the projector is ready for the photo memorial?" "It is," Mrs. Gable said, looking confused. "Excellent. Let's begin the presentation." Mrs. Gable hit a key on her laptop, but it wasn't a sepia-toned photo of my great-grandmother that appeared on the large pull-down screen. It was my front porch. The video was high definition, date-stamped, and silent. The room let out a collective gasp. On the screen, my Aunt Helena walked quickly up my steps. She looked left, then right, her movements bird-like and guilty. She saw the bright white certified mail envelope from Pioneer Trust, the one marked "Signature Verification Required," stuck to my door. She plucked it, didn't even look at it, and immediately shoved it deep into her oversized purse before hurrying away. The video played on a loop, Helena snatching the mail, Helena looking over her shoulder, Helena hiding the evidence. "That," Sloane's voice cut through the horrified silence, "is video from my client's doorbell camera. That envelope was the bank's final attempt to contact Lena Hart directly, to warn her that a loan application in her name, which she never filed, was about to be rejected for a failed signature match, an envelope my aunt, Helena Quinn, just intercepted." Helena made a small, strangled sound, like an animal caught in a trap. I was just collecting his mail." "Her mail," Sloane corrected. Next, I'd like to ask Ms. Davis to share her experience. Ms. Davis? The notary, a woman everyone in the room knew from the local library and the UPS store, stood. She was visibly nervous, but resolute. Thank you. On October 4th, an appointment was made for a Lena Hart to sign trust documents. A woman arrived. Ms. Davis paused, and then, slowly, raised her hand and pointed. Not at me. She pointed directly at Mara. That woman, Ms. Davis said, her voice shaking but firm, came in. She presented an ID, a driver's license. It was a very poor fake. The photo wasn't right. The hologram was missing. When I asked her to sign the pre-notarization log, the signature didn't match the one on the fake ID, let alone the one on file with the state. I refused the notarization. I told her I was obligated to report it. You're lying, Mara shrieked, jumping to her feet. It was me, but I was picking up papers for her. It was all a misunderstanding. The appointment was for a notarized signature, Ms. Davis said, her voice full of offense. And you tried to sign your name as Lena Hart. I am not mistaken. The room was in chaos. The town elders were staring, mouths agape. Mr. Henderson, the bank manager, was visibly scribbling notes. The columnist was writing so fast his pen was a blur. This is a disgrace, Roy roared, his face turning a deep, dangerous purple. You are slandering my family. This is a private matter. You have no right. Silence. The word was not shouted. It was spoken, by Silas, but it had the force of a thunderclap. He stood, tapping his cane once on the linoleum floor. The room went dead quiet. Silas drew the original ribbon-tied trust document from his coat pocket. He put on his reading glasses, his hands perfectly steady. This is not a family squabble. Roy, it is a legal proceeding. You, of all people, know the terms of this trust. But perhaps you have forgotten Section 9, Clause B. He held the paper up, his voice ringing with absolute authority. Should any beneficiary, he read, publicly insult, defame, or cause material harm to the reputation of another beneficiary, specifically the designated lifetime occupant of the Willow House property, that offending beneficiary shall be excised from any and all further disbursements, inheritances, or properties held within the Hart Family Trust. He lowered the document and looked at Mara. Mara, trapped, her lies exposed by the notary, her theft exposed by the video, just broke. All the pretense of misunderstanding dissolved, revealing the raw, ugly greed beneath. She laughed. It was a high, tearing, hysterical sound that was more of a scream. Insult her? She shrieked, her voice cracking. She deserves it. She deserves to be kicked out. She's a pathetic, broke, single mother, and she deserved every last bit of it. The room recoiled. It was a collective, audible gasp of pure shock at the venom, the raw, naked cruelty of it. My father tried to grab her, to silence her, but it was too late. The words were out. They hung in the air, irrevocable. Silas held up his hand. He looked at Mara. His eyes filled not with anger, but with a terrible, cold pity. He let the silence stretch, forcing her to stand in the echo of her own words. Then, he repeated the line I knew was coming, the promise, the prophecy. Then, he whispered, but his voice carried to every corner of the room. You will share her fate. He reached into his pocket again and produced the second, wax-sealed addendum. Your words, Mara, Silas said, were the final key. You have just, in front of this entire community, fulfilled the final activation clause, Ms. Mercer, if you please. Sloane stood. Addendum 2 to the Hart Family Trust, filed and sealed 8 years ago. Clause 1. In the event of a public admission of intentional malice, defamation, or harm against the beneficiary Lena Hart, for the purpose of financial gain, all designated inheritances, shares, and properties scheduled for the offending party, in this case, the entire Quinn family line, and any co-conspirators are declared forfeit. You can't, Helena wailed, finally understanding. That's everything. Roy, he can't. The addendum continues, Sloane said, her voice cutting through the wail. This clause takes immediate and irreversible effect upon public notice. A lawyer, a man I didn't recognize who must have been sitting with my family, jumped up. This is not a court of law. Public notice is a legally ambiguous term. This is a farce. Sloane didn't even look at him. She turned to the hall secretary, who was still taking meticulous minutes. Mrs. Gable, you are the duly appointed secretary for the Redwater Community Hall, a public access municipal building, are you not? Mrs. Gable, looking profoundly uncomfortable but unshakable, nodded. I am. And are you, at this moment, recording the minutes of this public gathering? I am, she said, holding up her stenopad. And did you just witness a formal, legal addendum being read aloud before this assembly of community members? Mrs. Gable looked at Roy, then at Silas, then at Sloane. Her loyalty was not to friendship, but to procedure. I did. It has been read. It has been witnessed. It is on the record. The lawyer sank back into his chair as if he'd been punched. It was over. The money was gone. The reputation was shattered. The future they had banked on was erased. And my father, Roy, in that final, awful moment, snapped. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He lunged. He lunged not at me, not at Sloane, but at Silas. He grabbed for the papers, for the trust document, and the addendum, his fingers clawing. You senile old fool, he roared, his face a mask of primal rage. You can't. That's my money. You can't give it all to her. He never touched Silas. The community hall's security guard, a man named Gary who usually just monitored the thermostats, was on him in a second. Gary, who my father had probably known for 20 years, grabbed Roy's arms and pinned them. Roy, no, you need to calm down. You need to sit down, now. And that was the final image. The image that would be repeated in every coffee shop and grocery store in Redwater for the next 10 years. Roy Hart, a man who built his identity on family unity and the common good, being physically restrained by a part-time security guard, his face purple, as he tried to assault his own father for money. It was a complete and total social and financial annihilation. I stood and watched it all, and for the first time in my life, I felt the air in my lungs. I felt the solid ground beneath my feet. I had kept my promise. Evan was at home, building a ship, sailing to a future that I had just, finally, made safe. The explosion at the Redwater Community Hall was not an ending. It was a detonation, the humiliation, the public unmasking, the surgical removal of their inheritance. It did not chasten them. It made them rabid. Within 24 hours, the first counterattack landed on Sloane's desk. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope bearing the embossed letterhead of Pike & Rowe, the most notoriously aggressive and expensive law firm in the city. They're threatening a countersuit, Sloane said, her voice flat over the phone. We were back in legal mode. Defamation of character, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and tortious interference with an inheritance. They're claiming you and Silas conspired to unduly influence him and that the addendum is a product of your coercion. They're demanding we retract everything and issue a public apology. They are suing us? The audacity was breathtaking. It's a classic Pike & Rowe strategy, Sloane said. They're not trying to win. They're trying to bleed you. They're betting you don't have the stomach or the funds to fight a protracted war on two fronts. Their first real shot was not legal. It was personal. It was dirty. The Redwater Journal's local gossip blog, a different section from the financial pages, suddenly lit up with an anonymous tip. The post was titled, Hart Heiress's Stable Home? Questions Arise About Single Mom's Past. The photos were grainy, digitized copies from at least 10 years ago. College, me, at maybe 21, at a fraternity party. In one, I was on the shoulders of an old boyfriend, both of us holding red plastic cups. In another, I was laughing, my head thrown back. They were pictures of a young woman being young. The anonymous comments, however, were vile. "This is the mother fighting for the house? Doesn't look very stable to me. Wonder where her kid was when these were taken." I felt the blood drain from my face. This wasn't about the house. This was aimed at Evan. This was the first shot in a custody battle. I was shaking with rage, but Sloan was ice. They're stupid. This is their move? To prove a 32-year-old architect was once a 21-year-old college student? This is a gift. Her response was not an emotional blog post. It was a single, 2-paragraph letter to Pike & Rose managing partner, CCing the journal's publisher. "My client," she wrote, "views your firm's decision to leak decade-old, irrelevant photographs as a clear violation of her privacy. This action is unrelated to the financial fraud at the heart of our claim. Any implication that these images, taken 10 years before the birth of her 6-year-old son, have any bearing on her fitness as a mother is libelous, defamatory, and a transparent attempt to intimidate a victim of financial crimes. We will be adding this action to our list of damages. The photos, and all associated commentary, will be taken down within the hour, or we will file for an emergency injunction and sanctions against your firm." The blog post vanished by noon. Thrust, parry. The next attack was quieter, more pathetic. My father. He appeared at my front door, bypassing Sloan, violating the legal safe distance we had established. I saw him on the new doorbell camera, his face gray and puffy. He looked like he had aged 20 years since the community hall. He rang the bell, his shoulders slumped. "Lena?" he called out, his voice thin. "Lena, honey, please, I know you're in there. I just want to talk to my daughter." I stood in my own hallway, watching his image on my phone. I didn't move. "Lena, please," he begged, his voice breaking. "You've got to stop this. You've got to call off your lawyer. I'm trapped. Honey, it was Mara. It was all Mara and Colt. They pressured me. I didn't understand the fund, the Ponzi thing. I'm ruined. Lena, you've ruined me. You're my daughter. You have to save me." The man who had given me 48 hours to get out, the man who had appraised my home to gamble it, the man who, at the hall, had lunged at his own father, he was asking me to save him. The psychological cost, this was it. The pain of it was a physical weight, a cold, heavy stone in my chest. But it wasn't confusion, it was the pain of a necessary amputation. I pressed the intercom button on my phone. My voice came out clear and cold, echoing from the speaker on the porch. "You need to leave. Dad, you are not to contact me directly. You can speak to my lawyer." His face crumpled. "Lena." I cut the connection. I watched him stand there for a full minute, a man I no longer knew, before he turned and shuffled away. Then came Helena. She tried a different approach, feigned remorse. She brought a Tupperware container. "It's your grandmother's recipe," she said through the intercom, her voice watery. "The lemon bars. I just want to talk. Lena, please, no lawyers, just family." I hesitated. Sloan had warned me. They are desperate. They are not contrite. They are cornered. Assume you are always being recorded. Assume every word is a trap. I let her in. I was cold, but civil. I put the lemon bars on the counter. I did not get her a drink. I stood by the island, my arms crossed, creating a barrier. I just feel so awful," she started, immediately bursting into tears. "It was all Roy. He and Mara. They told me it was all legal. They said you were just being stubborn, that it was to help the family." "Helena, what do you want?" I just want you to understand," she sniffled, dabbing her eyes. "Don't you feel bad? Even a little? What you did to your father? At the hall? He's a broken man. I was hoping you'd say you just got angry. That you misunderstood. that you'll apologize to him. She was pushing, too hard. She wanted me to say something, to admit I was wrong, to give them an emotional loophole. I have nothing to apologize for, Helena. Please, Lena. She looked so pathetic. She asked to use the restroom. The moment the door clicked shut, I moved. Sloan had given me a small, credit card-sized bug detector. I'd felt ridiculous taking it, but now. I picked up Helena's purse from the floor. I slid the detector over it. It didn't buzz. It vibrated silently. A single red light flashing, insistent. I didn't open the main compartment. I felt the side pocket. My fingers brushed a small, hard rectangular object. I slipped my phone out, turned on the camera, and angled it into the pocket. A small, black digital audio recorder. The red record light was glowing. My blood went cold. She was actively trying to bait me into an admission, into saying something she could twist into remorse. I put the purse down. When she came out, I was exactly as I had been. She tried for another 10 minutes, then left. Her tears miraculously dry. Her mission a failure. I locked the door behind her, photographed the recorder in her bag through the partially open zipper, and sent the image to Sloan. The next day, Helena received a formal police report for violating the state's two-party consent wiretapping laws. A felony. Thrust, parry. While the family was flailing, the bomb we had planted went off. The financial columnist at the Journal, acting on Sloan's anonymous leak, published his story. The lantern goes out. Local miracle fund evaporates. The North Lantern Group was officially, publicly exposed as a multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme. The director had vanished, last seen at an international terminal at Boston Logan. The SEC had frozen all known assets. The town was in an uproar. This changed the temperature from hot to Arctic. The money Mara had tried to steal for was gone. The money she already had in it was gone. And now, she wasn't just a participant in a family dispute. She was a named investor in a federal investigation. The panic was immediate. The next call Sloan got was from Pike & Rowe, and the arrogance was gone. They wanted a deal. "They're offering the Harborview lofts," Sloan told me, her voice carefully neutral as she sat across from me in her office. "The keys, the deed, free and clear. They're offering to drop their countersuit, and Mara will sign a gag order. In exchange, you withdraw all claims, no public apology, no reimbursement of fees. You just take the apartment and walk away." I thought about that apartment, the one she'd celebrated in, the white leather, the cold glass, the monument to her greed, bought with the phantom profits of a Ponzi scheme. "No," I said. Sloan smiled. "I thought you'd say that. Tell them I don't want their leftovers. I don't want the prize they bought with stolen money. This isn't about profit. It's about consequences." Sloan's smile widened. She picked up the phone. "My client declines. Our original offer stands. A full public apology, full reimbursement of all legal fees, and a permanent court-ordered asset injunction. You have 24 hours to accept, or we file." There was a week of silence, a week where I actually slept, a week where I took Evan to the park and didn't check my phone every 5 seconds. We were preparing to file the papers. Then, Pike & Rowe responded. It was arrogant. It was desperate. It was their final, fatal mistake. "They reject the settlement," Sloan said. Walking into her conference room, where I was reviewing the final documents, her face was an impossible mask of neutrality, but her eyes were dancing. What? "They reject it. They say they have new evidence. They say they have a newly discovered document that proves your consent. They claim to have a signed, notarized authorization from you, dated before the loan application, agreeing to let your father and Mara act as your agents." I felt the floor drop out. "What? I never signed anything. That's impossible." Sloan just smiled, a thin, cold, terrifying smile. "I know," she said, "because I created it." I just stared at her. What?" "It was a theory," she said, leaning back. "Pike & Rowe are aggressive, but they're not suicidal. They wouldn't pursue this defamation case. They wouldn't risk sanctions unless they thought they had something real. It meant someone was still feeding them documents. Someone from your family. So, I laid a trap. She pulled a file from her desk. During the initial discovery, we had to provide copies of my bank files, letters, etc. I included a draft authorization letter. It looked perfectly real, but I embedded a watermark in the PDF, a series of nearly invisible pixels, a digital fingerprint, unique to that one file. A trap, I whispered. I sent that one file, and only that file, to one person, your father's new lawyer, as a hypothetical of what a real release would look like. My theory was that the leak was in his office, that he was sloppy, and that he would pass it to Mara, and she would be dumb enough to forge your signature on it. So they took the bait? They forged my name on your fake document? Oh, it's better than that, Sloane said, her smile turning predatory. Pike and Rowe just sent us their new evidence. It's my watermarked PDF. They found it. They're trying to pass off a hypothetical document that I created as a real one. They've just committed fraud on the court. But that's not the best part. There's more? I was wrong about the leak. It wasn't Roy's lawyer. It wasn't Roy. It was Colt. She pulled up another file, an investigation report from a private detective. Colt, he's been selling documents from his father-in-law's office, and ours, from the discovery files, to Pike and Rowe. He's been acting as an internal mole for Mara's own lawyers. Why? She flipped the page. Because the Ponzi scheme didn't just wipe Mara out, it wiped him out, and he has gambling debts, massive ones. We tracked his online accounts. He's been losing thousands a night on offshore sports betting. He was selling his family's legal strategy to their own lawyers, probably getting paid in cash, just to chase his losses. I sat there, stunned. Colt, the quiet, smirking husband, he had been playing both sides against the middle, trying to salvage a few dollars from the wreckage he had helped create. Sloane didn't wait. She filed an emergency motion for sanctions based on the fraudulent evidence. We were all called for an immediate hearing. It wasn't a courtroom, but a sterile conference room at the courthouse. Mara was there, looking thin and vicious, her Pike and Rowe lawyers beside her. Colt was at the end of the table, looking green. Sloane presented the evidence. She showed the watermarked PDF. She showed the metadata proving she had created it. She showed the email trail from her office to Roy's. And then she presented the betting slips and the investigator's report. The new evidence your lawyers presented, Sloane said, addressing Mara directly, is a fabrication, a trap, a document I created, and it was sold to them by your husband, Colt. Mara's head snapped toward Colt. The look on her face was not anger. It was disintegration. It was the horrifying, complete realization that the man she had conspired with, the man she had built this entire house of cards with, had just sold her out for a long-shot bet. Colt started to stammer. Mara, I just needed the money. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked at him, her face a pale skeletal mask, her eyes dead. You, she whispered, her voice shaking with a coldness that was more terrifying than her rage at the community hall. It was you. Mara, wait. Get him away from me, she shrieked, her voice rising to a raw, broken sound. Get him out! Get him away from me! The family hadn't just fractured, it had devoured itself. Pike and Rowe, realizing they had been used and had themselves committed fraud, immediately withdrew as counsel. The countersuit was dead. The war was over. The collapse of Mara's countersuit was a legal checkmate. The moment her own lawyers abandoned her in that conference room, the war was, for all intents and purposes, over. The enemy was routed, scattered, and had, in the end, turned on itself. But victory didn't feel like a parade. It felt like standing in the quiet, smoking aftermath of a demolition. The threat was gone, but the foundations of my life, my concept of family, my past, my relationship with my own father, were rubble. I walked with Evan to the park. I pushed him on the swings. I watched him scramble up the climbing wall, and for the first time in months, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't checking my phone for alerts. I was just there. And in that quiet, the exhaustion hit me. It was a bone-deep weariness, the kind that comes after a long, high-adrenaline siege. Mara was broken, ruined by the North Lantern scandal and her husband's betrayal. Helena was facing a felony wiretapping charge. Roy, my father, was a pariah, the man who had lunged at Silas in a public hall. They were finished. I found myself wondering, isn't that enough? Couldn't I just stop for Evan? Couldn't I just take this win, lock my door, and let the rest of it fade away? We were safe. Willow House was secure. Wasn't that the entire point? I voiced this to Silas over tea in his dark, quiet study. It's over, isn't it? Sloan wants to pursue the final court orders, the formal judgments on the fraud. But Mara has nothing left to give. Roy is destroyed. Is it necessary to keep going? For Evan's sake, I just want him to have peace. Silas looked at me over his teacup, his pale blue eyes as clear as ever. He set the cup down with a precise, quiet click. Forgiveness, Lena, he said, his voice gentle but firm, is not the same as erasing the consequences. Forgiveness is for you. It's letting go of the rage. Consequences are for them. They are the boundary. They are the high, steel-reinforced concrete wall you must build around your new life, so that this never happens again. Peace is not the absence of a fight. Peace is the absolute, unimpeachable certainty that you are safe. His words settled in me. He was right. A simple victory was not enough. I needed a permanent boundary. That night, as I was tucking Evan into bed, he turned to me, his small face serious in the light of his spaceship nightlight. Mommy? Yes, buddy? We live in the Willow House. Is it our forever house? The question was so simple, so direct. It was the question of a 6-year-old. But it was the only question that mattered. He wasn't asking about inheritances, or fraud, or family. He was asking if he was stable. He was asking if the ground beneath his feet would hold. I sat on the edge of his bed and smoothed his hair. Yes, Evan, I said, my voice thick but steady. This is our forever house. It is safe, and it is ours. And I will always, always keep it safe for you. Okay, he said, satisfied. He hugged his stuffed bear, rolled over, and was asleep in 5 minutes. I stood in his doorway, watching him. That was the answer. My exhaustion didn't matter. My desire to just be done didn't matter. He needed a forever, and as Silas said, that required a wall. My own life, the one outside of the family battlefield, began to return. My boss at Harbor and Vale Studio, who had been incredibly supportive, called me into his office. Lena, he said, your name, well, it's been in the ether, but not in the way you think. The work you did on Willow House, the community buzz about your preservation efforts, and frankly, the way you handled yourself. It's been noticed. He pushed a thick binder across his desk. The town council, in light of the North Lantern disaster, is fast-tracking a new community housing initiative, a fund for first-time buyers and low-income families. They want to build real, sustainable, affordable homes, not just fantasy investments. They need a lead architect, someone who understands preservation, but also community. They asked for you, specifically. I opened the binder. It was a multi-million-dollar project. It was a chance to build dozens of homes, a chance to create stability for other families, just as I had fought to create it for my own. My family had tried to leverage a home for greed. I was being asked to build homes as an antidote. Yes, I said, without hesitation. I'm in. Sloan was pleased, but not surprised. Of course you are. It's who you are, Lena, which is why we need to finish this. We can't just accept their surrender. We need the final judgment from the court. We need a legal precedent, a court order that validates the trust, confirms the fraud, and puts a permanent restraining order on their ability to ever access your finances or property again. It's the wall, Lena. This is how we build it. The final pieces of the old life tried. one last time, to pull me back. A letter arrived, not from a lawyer. It was handwritten, on my father's personal stationery. Lena, I don't know what to do. I am lost. My home is in foreclosure. My accounts are frozen. The North Lantern. I didn't know. You have to believe me. I made a terrible mistake. I was pressured. But I am still your father. I am begging you. I don't care about the money. I need to see my grandson. I need to see Evan. He is the only good thing left. Please don't keep him from me. He doesn't deserve to lose his grandfather over this. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost pathetic. He was using my own son as a shield. He was using Evan's innocence as his last, desperate bargaining chip. The man who had been willing to make that same child homeless was now claiming to be his last refuge. I did not respond. I gave the letter to Sloane, who forwarded it to a family therapist she knew. My response came through the therapist's office, a formal invitation. Ms. Hart agrees to a supervised, public visit. The meeting will take place at the Redwater Community Park. This Saturday at 10 a.m., Drs. Elias, a family counselor, will be present to facilitate. The visit will be limited to 1 hour. The discussion of legal or financial matters in front of the child is strictly prohibited. This was not a negotiation. It was my terms. He came. He looked thin, gray, and utterly defeated. Dr. Elias and I sat on a bench, and Roy stood awkwardly by the swing set. Evan, who I had simply told, "Grandpa Roy is here to see you play," ran right past him. "Look, Grandpa, I can go this high," Evan shouted, pumping his legs, soaring toward the sky. He wasn't scared. He wasn't traumatized. He was just a happy, loud, joyful 6-year-old in a bright yellow jacket. He pointed to the old-fashioned merry-go-round. "Push me! Push me on the rockets!" My father stood frozen for a long moment. He was watching this vibrant, fearless little boy who wanted nothing more than to be pushed on a swing. He saw the simple, uncomplicated piece that he had tried to trade for a 30% return. He slowly walked over to the swing, his hands shaking, and gave it a small, hesitant push. Evan laughed. My father's face crumpled. He didn't cry. He just broke. He turned his back, walked over to a tree, and stared at the lake for the rest of the hour. A silent, solitary man. He saw what he had tried to destroy, and he saw that it had survived, perfect and untouched, without him. While Roy was confronting his ghosts, Silas was securing the future. He went for a full physical, his first in 5 years. "The engine needs a tune-up," he'd said gruffly. But it was more than that. It was an acknowledgement of his own mortality. The following day, he had Sloane finalize a new, separate trust. He transferred a significant portion of his own funds into an educational scholarship trust for Evan. It was untouchable, immediate, and completely independent of the main Hart inheritance. He was ensuring that, no matter what happened to him or the rest of the estate, Evan's future was ironclad. I, in turn, secured the house. I signed the final plan with the Redwater Historical Society. At the end of the year, Willow House would be granted heritage status. It would be my home, and Evan's, for as long as we lived, but it would also be protected, a community asset, its preservation fund endowed by Silas. It could never be leveraged, never be sold, never be threatened by greed again. It was, finally, forever. With all the pieces in place, the final call came. I was at my desk at Harbor and Vale, sketching a design for the new community center, when my phone buzzed. It was Sloane. "It's set," she said. Her voice was quiet, final. "The court has reviewed our petition on the signature fraud. They've scheduled the final hearing. They're calling it an evidentiary validation. It's a formality. Lena. But it's the one we need. The judge will sign the order. It will be on the public record." "When?" "In 1 week." I hung up the phone. I felt calm. The wall was almost built. That evening, Silas called. His voice was different. Not cold, not strategic, almost nostalgic. Lena, he said, before the court date, before it all becomes law, I want to do one last thing, a family, ritual, at Willow House. A ritual? What do you mean? Your great-grandmother, the one we had the memorial for. She had a tradition, a clearing of the books before the new year. I am summoning the family, what's left of it, Roy, Helena, Mara, one last night, at your house. Grandfather, no, why? Why would I let them back in my home? Because, he said, and his voice was heavy. This is not about them anymore. It is about you. You are the head of this family now, and the head of the family must be the one to formally, finally, close the ledger. I stood on the porch of Willow House, my home, and watched them arrive. It was not a storm this time. It was the quiet, gray wreckage washing ashore. Roy, my father, looked thin, his suit hanging off his frame. Helena, my aunt, stared at the ground, her face puffy and vacant, and Mara. She was a hollowed-out version of herself, the bright, brittle energy gone, replaced by a cold, simmering resentment. They looked like ghosts, forced to haunt the place they had tried to destroy. My first act as the head of the house had been to ensure its innocence. Mrs. Allen had arrived an hour earlier. I had walked Evan up to the attic playroom, a space I had finished with bright walls, soft rugs, and his entire Lego city. He was building, completely absorbed, a small universe of his own making. Mrs. Allen was reading a book in the corner. He was safe. He was peaceful. He was protected, walled off from the toxicity I was about to purge from his home. I closed the attic door and walked down to the living room. Silas and Sloane were already there. Sloane had set up a large monitor on the mantel, a small, discreet camera on top. My family filed in, silent, and took seats on the sofa opposite me. They sat stiffly, not touching, a small island of mutual misery. Silas stood by the fireplace, his hand resting on the smooth, dark wood. My mother, he began, his voice filling the room, used to have a tradition, the clearing of the books, before the new year. All debts were named, and all accounts were settled. We are here tonight to settle the accounts. Roy flinched. Silas, please, we've lost enough. This is just cruel. Cruelty, Silas said, his voice level, is giving a mother and her child 48 hours to leave their home. This is not cruelty. This is accounting. Sloane looked at her watch. It's 7 p.m. The court is ready. She clicked a mouse. The large screen on the mantel flickered to life, and the stern, tired face of a superior court judge appeared. He was in his chambers, a flag and a wall of law books behind him. This is Judge Harrison, Sloane announced to the room. We are on the record. This is the evidentiary validation hearing for Hart v. Hart et al. Regarding the complaint of fraud and conspiracy. Mara's lawyer, a new, court-appointed public defender, looked overwhelmed. Ms. Mercer, the judge said, his voice tinny from the speakers. We have all reviewed the filings. The evidence is, frankly, overwhelming. Is there any reason we should not move to summary judgment? One moment, Your Honor, Silas said. He stepped forward. Before the court issues its final civil order, I must unseal the final addendum to the Hart Family Trust, as it dictates the nature of the financial consequences. The judge nodded. Proceed, Mr. Hart. Silas pulled the last sealed envelope, the one with the dark red wax, from his coat. He broke the seal. He didn't read it with anger. He read it like a man reading a theorem that had just been proven correct. The final addendum, the share thy fate clause, he read. Should any beneficiary, through fraud, coercion, insult, or deception, attempt to dispossess or tarnish the lifetime beneficiary of Willow House, that person or persons shall share the legal and financial fate equivalent to the damage they intended to inflict. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. The total value of their intended fraudulent gain, in this case, the full appraised value of the Willow House property, shall be considered the primary debt, all inheritances, properties, and funds designated for the offending parties shall be seized by the trust and immediately repurposed to satisfy this debt, with any remaining balance converted to a legal judgment. It was not just that they had lost their inheritance, it was that their inheritance would now be used to pay for the crime they had tried to commit. They had tried to steal my home, so their future would be the price. Your Honor, Sloane said, stepping in front of the monitor, I will now, for the record, summarize the evidence that this trigger has been met. 1. The fraudulent, watermarked PDF, created by my office and submitted to the court by opposing counsel, proving a knowing attempt to fabricate evidence. The camera panned to the document on the screen. 2. The IP address log, showing the failed e-signature attempt originating from Mara and Colt Quinn's residence at 2:14 a.m. 3. The sworn affidavit from the independent notary, identifying Mara Quinn as the individual who attempted to fraudulently sign in my client's name. 4. The data extracted from Colt Quinn's phone, showing his conspiracy with Roy Hart to push Lena out first and handle the paperwork later. And 5, Sloane said, picking up a small digital recorder, the public admission of malice, recorded at the Redwater Community Hall. She pressed play, the room filled with Mara's voice, high, raw, and full of hate. She deserves it. She deserves to be kicked out. Sloane stopped the recording. The silence that followed was absolute. The judge looked at the screen. He looked at Mara, at Roy, at Helena. This court finds that the evidence of conspiracy, wire fraud, identity theft, and malicious intent is irrefutable. The judgment is for the plaintiff, Lena Hart. He signed a paper. The ruling is as follows. Mara Quinn, Colt Quinn, Roy Hart, and Helena Quinn are found jointly and severally liable for all legal fees and compensatory damages, the total to be determined. A permanent restraining order is hereby issued, barring all 4 defendants from approaching within 500 feet of the Willow House property or contacting Lena Hart or her minor son, Evan Hart, in any way, except through official legal counsel. The trust addendum, as read by Mr. Hart, is validated by this court, and its financial consequences are cleared to be executed. We are adjourned. The screen went black. It was over. Sloane began to pack her briefcase. The financial execution was next. The share thy faith clause was active. The value of their inheritance, the money they had been counting on their entire lives, was now officially seized by the trust. Sloane turned to me. The funds are redirected. As you instructed, they are not going to you. She looked at my family. The total value of your forfeited inheritance has been transferred, effective immediately, into 2 new, irrevocable funds. The first is the Evan Hart Educational Trust. The second is the Willow House Preservation Fund, which will endow this property's heritage status in perpetuity. Roy finally broke. It wasn't a lunge this time. It was an implosion. He slid from the sofa onto his knees, his hands covering his face. He made a sound, a deep, guttural sob of absolute despair. Lena, he choked out, not looking at me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I looked at this broken man on my floor. I felt nothing, no triumph, no satisfaction, just pity and a vast, cold distance. I am not the person you need to apologize to, I said, my voice quiet. If you ever want to see your grandson again, you will enter the family counseling program, Dr. Elias recommended. You will go for 1 year. You will do the work. And then, maybe, we can talk about a supervised visit. Those are my terms. Mara, however, was not broken. She was pure, distilled venom. She stood up, her eyes black. You think you've won, she hissed. You think you're so smart. I just wanted what was fair. I just wanted... Sloane didn't even look at her. She just pressed play on the recorder again. She deserves it. She deserves to be kicked out. Mara's own voice cut her off. It was the final, perfect, moral judgment. She recoiled, as if Sloane had struck her. She had nothing left to say. Her own words were her epitaph. Silas walked over to me. He looked at the three of them, the remnants of his family, with a profound, final sadness. Then he turned to me. He held his silver-headed cane, the wolf's head gleaming in the lamplight. He held it out to me, handle first. "From now on, Lena," he said, his voice soft, "you are the one who keeps the house." I took it. The silver was heavy and cool and perfectly balanced. Sloane and I walked them to the door. They left, one by one, disappearing into the night. I locked the door, and for the first time, I felt the click of the deadbolt as a final, permanent seal. The next week, I signed the final papers. Willow House was officially a nonprofit heritage site. My first act was to use the new preservation fund to open the house on weekends. I ran a small workshop for kids in the town, teaching them about architectural safety, about foundations, about how to build things that last. Evan was my first student, proudly wearing a tiny plastic hard hat, his face serious as he explained load-bearing walls to the other children. He was protected, he was respected, and he was home. I was standing on the porch with Sloane, watching them play in the yard. "Justice isn't loud, Lena," she said, sipping her coffee. "It's not a party, it's durable. It's just a foundation that holds." I leaned against the railing I had rebuilt with my own hands. That night, after Evan was asleep, I stood on the porch, turning on the porch light. The air was cool, smelling of pine and the promise of a quiet night. From the yard, I could hear the faint click of the cooling metal on the grill. Peace. I looked up at the wall, at a black and white photograph of a young, vital Silas, taken decades ago, his eyes sharp even then. "I kept the promise," I whispered. Outside, on the gate, a new brass plaque had been installed. It gleamed in the twilight. It read, "Willow House, a Hart Family Trust home." Silas's words came back to me, but they were no longer a threat. They were a boundary, a definition. Then she will share your fate. No one had been shamed in front of a child, and no one was left with the power to ever again call our peace something to be shared. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Please drop a comment below and let me know where in the world you're listening from. I'd love to connect, share our thoughts, and if you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Be sure to like this video, and if you can, support us by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.